Indonesia memegang keketuaan ASEAN 2023 dengan mengusung tema ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. Negara-negara anggota ASEAN bertekad untuk tetap relevan dan juga menjadi pusat pertumbuhan, tidak hanya di kawasan Asia Tenggara, namun juga di dunia. Berbagai strategi telah disiapkan untuk memastikan agenda-agenda prioritas akan dijalankan di bawah keketuaan Indonesia dalam ASEAN 2023. Kita akan membahasnya bersama dengan Sekretaris Jenderal ASEAN, Kao Kim Horn, bersama saya Puja Lestari. Inilah BeritaSatu Spesial selengkapnya. Untuk mengetahui lebih dalam strategi apa yang akan ditempuh oleh negara-negara anggota ASEAN untuk mencapai tujuan tersebut, kami sudah bersama dengan Sekretaris Jenderal ASEAN, Dr. Kao Kim Horn. Excellency, Dr. Kao Kim Horn, thank you for welcoming us here. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming to the Secretariat.
Thank you for welcoming us. How do you like working in Indonesia, especially in Jakarta so far?
Well, I have been working for the past 3 months. I think we have a busy schedule here. It's good to be in Jakarta. It's a regional capital, very busy, a lot of traffic, a lot of people. But more importantly, we have a lot of ambassadors based in Jakarta now.
It's so nice to see that you're enjoying living in and working in Jakarta. Dr. Kao, as we all know that the world is still facing high uncertainty this year. As the Secretary General of ASEAN, how do you see the position of ASEAN amidst all of this global uncertainty?
Well, of course, there's a lot of uncertainties and unpredictability situation around the world, but certainly in ASEAN, our officials at all levels, of course, more importantly, our leaders are working very hard to build a region which, of course, anchors on peace, stability, security, and development, as well as give the high priority to their prosperity agenda. So I think despite the global uncertainty, but for ASEAN, there's a lot of degree of certainty.
And we know that one of the challenges is to, of course, foster economic growth. But IMF has just revised its projection of global economic growth from 2.7% to 2.9%. And that increase hinting that the global economy will be less gloomy than expected before. However, ASEAN is predicted to grow slower due to the higher interest rates this year. But they say that China's reopening is said to be the savior this year. What do you think of this?
Of course, the global economic growth rate is somewhat still moving in a positive direction, say compared in the previous years. But for ASEAN, the economic growth rate is still quite high, above the global averages. So I think this is still quite positive on the ASEAN side. Now, of course, China is one of our important dialogue partner countries, and China has already announced that they has completely reopened, and particularly in all sectors, include tourism industry. I just make my visit to China recently, and they say ASEAN is a top priority for Chinese tourists, particularly starting this year. So I think the prospect look very promising.
You are optimistic for the ASEAN economic growth. But in your opinion, what should ASEAN countries do to maintain the economic stability in the region?
Well, there's many things that ASEAN economists have been discussing in order to push ahead the economic development agenda, particularly in the post-COVID-19 recovery. One, of course, is to continue to embark on the intra-ASEAN trade, investment, and tourism, to make sure that we continue to do more trade among ASEAN member states. But looking at the current study among, say, the 3 top regional trading arrangements, of course, the EU, they still a bit ahead, and then followed by NAFTA, US, Canada, and Mexico, for example. But ASEAN is the top 3. We are not doing that bad. But I think moving forward, of course, the AFTA Council, they want to double the amount of intra-ASEAN trade investment. That's since 2017, and they want to see this number double by 2025. So although the number is still quite high because of the impact of COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine, of course, but I think the prospect is still quite positive for that. So that's on intra-ASEAN trade investment. At the same time, ASEAN economies are already pushing ahead to upgrade the what we call ASEAN trade in goods agreements, ATIGA, and also to upgrade the bilateral FTAs between ASEAN and direct partner countries. Now, at the moment, of course, we have China, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, even India. So all of these is that we have a lot of priorities to work on in terms of upgrading the bilateral FTAs in order to make the FTA more relevant to our business sector, but also to ensure that our FTA is really in favor of our economic agenda. So on that front, I think it's quite good also. Now, with regard to the regional comprehensive economic partnership, this is the second year. I think we are ready to move forward on the full implementation. Now, recently, the ASEAN economic minister already trying to finalize the funding mechanism and get the temporary OSAF support unit within the Secretariat moving ahead and working on the accession protocol. So I think we're going to speeding up on this front. I believe that these are moving forward quite positively. Another area, of course, our economists are also looking at the new drivers of the economy, looking at the blue economy, the green economy, and certainly the digital economy. Now, according to the initial study that is being done that on digital economy, we will add roughly about $1 trillion to the ASEAN economy by 2030. At the moment, our economic minister have already commissioned Boston Concern Group to look at the details, how we can really take advantage of the digital economy for all the ASEAN member states. So overall, I can say that we really are in a positive area, and I think we have to keep it that way.
You think you are very optimistic with how ASEAN grows towards the future, but what do you think is our biggest strength to achieve that?
The biggest strength?
Amongst all the ASEAN countries?
Well, the strength thing is that, number one, we believe in ourselves. We believe in what we do, and that's why the agenda of Indonesia as chair of this year, Indonesia put out a very wonderful theme for this year, ASEAN Matters, the epic syndrome of growth. ASEAN does matter. What we do, how much we negotiate, the priorities that we work on, and the attraction that we have made with regard to the external partners that we want to do more with ASEAN, ranging from upgrading the bilateral FTAs to the elevation of strategic partnership. All of this, it means that they have trust and confidence in what we do. And I think that's the key. That's what is the strength of ASEAN at the moment.
Trust and confidence is the key. Dr. Kao, besides economic growth, one of the other priorities is to, of course, foster peace in the region. We're going to talk about that, but after a short break. Pemirsa, Sekretaris Jenderal ASEAN menyebut bahwa kepercayaan dan juga kepercayaan di antara negara-negara di ASEAN menjadi salah satu kunci untuk pertumbuhan ekonomi di ASEAN. Setelah ini kami akan membahas terkait dengan seperti apa strategi ASEAN dalam menumbuhkan perdamaian di kawasan ASEAN. Tetaplah bersama kami di BeritaSatu Spesial.
Informasi dari dunia hiburan, baik pelaku hingga karya terkini yang sedang beredar di masyarakat, disajikan secara berdaring dengan berbagai sudut pandang yang berimbang, tanpa menyudutkan. Esensi memberikan warna baru dari dunia infotainment.
Hai, aku Gabriela. Jangan lupa saksikan Esensi, semua informasi penting selebriti, setiap hari Senin sampai Jumat jam 1 siang hanya di BTV.
Penyanyi keren Mark Databa tampil memukau dengan lagu yang dibawakan. Tersaji epik malam ini bersama penyanyi cantik Nada Sika membawakan lagu dan bercerita untuk pemirsa. Jangan lewatkan penampilan mereka.
Hai, aku Nada Sika.
Gua Mark Natama, jangan lupa saksikan
Di Epic.
Saksikan Epic Kamis 6 April jam 8 malam hanya di BTV Persatu Raih Berkah.
Jangan lupa saksikan CLBK karena akan seru bersama Marcel William. Halo teman-teman semuanya, aku Marsha Widianto. Jangan lupa aku akan bermain di CLBK, Cak Lontong Blak-Blakan, setiap hari Jumat jam 9 malam. Bahasa apa ya ntar ya? Waduh, ramai banget lagi nih.
Saksikan Jumat jam 9 malam hanya di BTV.
Mantap sekali.
Bersama BTV, bersatu raih berkah.
Pemirsa, Indonesia memegang keketuaan ASEAN di tahun 2023. Beberapa agenda menjadi prioritas di bawah keketuaan Indonesia, salah satunya ialah menumbuhkan perdamaian di kawasan. Untuk mengetahui seperti apa pendapat dari Sekretaris Jenderal ASEAN terhadap keketuaan Indonesia dan apa saja strategi yang akan dilakukan untuk menumbuhkan kedamaian, saya akan menanyakannya langsung kepada Sekretaris Jenderal Dr. Kau Kim Horn. Mr. Kau, if before we talk about the economic projection outlook in ASEAN in the future. Now let's talk about how do you see Indonesia as the chair of ASEAN. This year, we bring the theme of ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth, as the theme. And how optimistic are you in making ASEAN as the actual epicentrum of growth?
Well, I think Indonesia has been quite bold under its chairmanship this year and has put out a lot of priority economic deliverables, and of course also other priorities for the other two pillars of the ASEAN community. Indonesia is taking the opportunity as ASEAN year to really advancing the ASEAN agenda, ASEAN's interests, which is very, very important. And of course, the focus wide-ranging from the maintenance of peace, stability in the region to strengthening of the economic position of ASEAN within the region as well. At the same time, to enhance our external relations with the dialogue partners and other external partners. So I think Indonesia will do quite well this year.
You think Indonesia will do quite well, but do you have expectation from Indonesia as the chair of ASEAN 2023?
Yeah, I think the expectations, of course, there are a lot of expectations of course, number one would be the ASEAN member states. Number two, of course, certainly the external partners, but also there are other interested parties.
Yeah.
Certainly, of course, expectation meaning that this year Indonesia will continue to work on the economic recovery agenda, and that's why we have 16 what we call economic priorities.
Yeah.
Deliverables. So this is really focused on making sure that ASEAN is on the right track with regard to the economic recovery. So I think that's quite important. And in particular, Indonesia is focusing on digital economy, but also on the MSMEs, which of course are a very important part of the overall economy of ASEAN. 90% of the ASEAN economy based on MSME. So that's quite important for us, yeah.
Besides this economic agenda, Indonesia's priority as the chair is also to foster peace in the region. How urgent do you think that priority right now?
It is an important priority given the current geopolitical tensions and of course the geopolitical rivalry there. We certainly want to make sure that ASEAN, as we have already been expressing ourselves, but also we have received the expression of support for the ASEAN centrality, meaning in all the ASEAN-led mechanism. So it's important that we are able to use all our platforms to reduce tensions in the region, but also to promote confidence and trust, particularly strategic trust among our external partners, particularly our friends, our dialogue partners like US and China, for example. So it's important for us to continue to focus on the strengthening of strategic trust. At the same time, focusing on the conflict prevention. We certainly want to see more dialogue, more consultations, and of course more engagement with each other through all the ASEAN-led mechanism. And that's why, of course, in 2019, the ASEAN leaders decided to initiate the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. And this year under Indonesian leadership here, of course, is that we have prioritized the 4 areas of cooperation, 4 areas of priorities. under the Indo-Pacific, under the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, AOIP. So here what we have is that we want the dialogue partners, external partners that have already put out their own strategy to support the ASEAN centrality. So that's why it's important for us to really be the key driving force for peace, for stability, and for public goods in our region.
Dr. Kao, if we're talking about peace and stability in the ASEAN region, of course we cannot leave out what happened in Myanmar right now. And before, Myanmar junta leader is said to not to be invited in ASEAN summit this year. How did we come to that decision? Is it the decision of all ASEAN countries member, or is it by Indonesia as the chair?
Well, all of this started since 2021. You know very well that ASEAN leaders had their emergency meeting here in Jakarta at this secretariat, ASEAN secretariat. All ASEAN leaders came here, had their meeting, and they agree on the 5-point consensus. Subsequently, of course, we all wanted the implementation of 5-point consensus. But in the end, of course, there was no consensus. So I think what led to initially the Brunei at the time was the chair of ASEAN. Based on the lack of consensus, we ended up invited non-political representative from Myanmar to attend the meetings, the summit in 2021. And of course, since then, it's not just only the summit, but also the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. And of course, when it went to Cambodia also, because there's no consensus, we continue to stick on to this approach. Now for Indonesia in 2023, I believe that Indonesia will continue what has been the established practice now, which of course is to invite non-political representative from Myanmar to attend the ASEAN summit, related summits, and the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. And this is where we are right now, the situation right now with regard to that.
Mr. Kao, after this, we're going to talk about your priority as the Secretary General of ASEAN this year, but after the commercial breaks. Pemirsa, tentu saja kedamaian menjadi salah satu prioritas yang diusung di bawah keketuaan Indonesia. Dan sebagai Ketua ASEAN 2023, Indonesia akan terus mendorong perdamaian, khususnya dalam mengatasi krisis atau konflik yang ada di Myanmar. Setelah ini kita akan mendalami lebih lanjut terkait dengan prioritas apa saja yang akan dibawa oleh Sekretari Jenderal ASEAN, Kao Kim Horn. Usai jeda, tetaplah di BeritaSatu Spesial.
Informasi dari dunia hiburan, baik pelaku hingga karya terkini yang sedang beredar di masyarakat. Disajikan secara berdaring dengan berbagai sudut pandang yang berimbang. Tanpa menyudutkan, esensi memberikan warna baru dari dunia infotainment.
Hai, aku Gabriela. Jangan lupa saksikan Esensi, semua informasi penting selebriti, setiap hari Senin sampai Jumat jam 1 siang hanya di BTV.
Penyanyi keren Mark Datama tampil memukau dengan lagu yang dibawakan. Tersaji epik malam ini bersama penyanyi cantik Nada Sika membawakan lagu dan bercerita untuk pemirsa. Jangan lewatkan penampilan mereka.
Hai, aku Nada Sika.
Gua Mark Natama, jangan lupa saksikan
Epic.
Saksikan Epic Kamis 6 April jam 8 malam hanya di BTV Bersatu Raih Berkah.
Jangan lupa saksikan CLBK karena akan seru bersama Marcel Widianto.
Halo teman-teman semuanya, aku Marcel Widianto. Jangan lupa aku akan bermain di CLBK, Cak Lontong Blak-Blakan, setiap hari Jumat jam 9 malam. Bahasa apa ya ntar ya? Waduh, ramai banget lagi nih.
Saksikan Jumat jam 9 malam hanya di BTV.
Mantap sekali.
Bersama BTV Bersatu Raih Berkah.
Pemirsa, terima kasih Anda masih bersama kami di BeritaSatu Spesial. Indonesia menjadi Ketua ASEAN 2023. Selain tantangan ekonomi dan juga tantangan dalam membangun perdamaian di kawasan ASEAN, tentu ada tantangan-tantangan lain yang mungkin akan dihadapi oleh negara-negara anggota ASEAN ke depannya. Saya akan bertanya kepada Sekretari Jenderal ASEAN, Dr. Kao Kim Horn, terkait dengan tantangan apa saja yang mungkin akan dihadapi oleh negara-negara anggota ASEAN. Dr. Kau, if before we talk about the challenge among the ASEAN countries in the aspect of economy and peace in the region, do you think that there are other challenges that ASEAN countries need to be looked out for?
Well, of course, there are other challenges that we have to be aware of and that we give priority to. Of course, one, we need to resolve the South China Sea issue, which of course under Indonesian chairmanship, we have heard already that Indonesia would like to expedite the negotiations on the issue of South China Sea. I think this is the 21st year since the DOC that went into effect, because DOC was signed into 2002. So last year they had the 20th anniversary, and this is the 21 years that have been already in existence. So that's why we should expedite the negotiation. Second, of course, the Korean Peninsula, the North Korea, test fire missile, and this has really certainly not a very good factor in terms of affecting the regional peace and stability. So that's something that we have been engaging over many years now. And of course the Ukraine-Russia war that has a lot of impact on the global community. Certainly, of course, ASEAN is no exception. Then we have, of course, climate change that very much has a lot of impacts on the region, on ASEAN. So I think this is what we're going to see coming in the next several years. We'll see how much more impact we're going to confront with this. And of course, cybersecurity, among others. So these are some of the issues that we have to really continue to give top priority to in order to address their impact on ASEAN and ASEAN member states.
Dr. Kau, you mentioned before that one of the issues that ASEAN should face is Russia and Ukraine issue. From your point of view, will ASEAN take part in encouraging peace in that region, and how can we encourage peace in that region?
Well, the position of ASEAN has been very consistent since last year. ASEAN has always called upon the parties to the conflict to go back to the negotiating table, and also to ensure that destruction will not take place, particularly the civilian casualties. Of course, also the destruction there, and at the same time, of course, to respect the UN Charter and the international law. I think ASEAN has been a strong advocate of peace and stability in the world, not just only in our region. And recently, during the retreat of the ASEAN Foreign Minister, we have seen that again, ASEAN Foreign Minister call upon the parties of the conflict to exercise restraint and to really give peace a chance and go back to diplomacy. So I think this is something that we have seen that ASEAN has taken a clear position. Now, this of course reflects in all the ASEAN documents, whether that's in Charter, the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in South Asia, TSC is there, ZOFAN, and even the Southeast Asia Nuclear Weapon Free Zone Treaty also all is about peace, stability within the region.
I see. So we've talked about the challenges before and how ASEAN should tackle those challenges. And Dr. Kau, you mentioned when you were appointed as ASEAN Secretary General before, you mentioned that you have 6 priorities for ASEAN, which is peace, prosperity, and other priorities. And what is your strategy to address these priorities to make ASEAN stronger and better in the future?
Well, during the handover office of the Secretary General of ASEAN, I outlined my 6 Ps as of my priority in a 5-year mandate. And every day I'm looking at this 6 Ps. What can I do within my mandate to continue to ensure that ASEAN will be able to move forward on those 6 Ps? One, of course, on peace. We cannot take peace for granted in the region. Certainly, of course, the current generation of ASEAN enjoy peace and stability and security. But we should never take it for granted. The fact that what you see in Ukraine reminds us that peace is very fragile, and we have to work on a daily basis to maintain and secure peace for the region and for our people. Second, of course, is on prosperity. The prosperity agenda is a top priority for ASEAN. ASEAN leaders, ASEAN ministers really pay very close attention to the prosperity agenda. We want to make sure that economic development, sustainable development, all will translate down to the improvement of livelihoods of our people. We still have pockets of poverty within the region. We need to continue to work on that. And of course, that's why the priority of ASEAN is to really continue to focus on increasing trade and investment and tourism industry. This is all about how we can continue to enhance the prosperity agenda for all of us. So prosperity is really a long-term, not just only a short-term, but a long-term interest of all ASEAN member states, of course, also ASEAN. Now, my third P, of course, is on certainly on what I call the planet.
Yeah.
The planet, what you see now is climate change. And climate change really have long-term impact on all ASEAN member states and on ASEAN collectively. And this is really what we see now, the regular floods, massive floods, droughts, of course the rising temperature of 1.5, we see already, you can feel it very hot outside. All of it changed the way we do a lot of things. So it has a lot of impact on our region. We hope that we should continue to give priority to how we can reverse this. Of course, all ASEAN member states have their respective commitments according to COP26. But yet, together, we can continue to work together to ensure that we really need to invest into the future of our young people in the region. And that's why the planet agenda is also quite important. We see that our leaders have already trying to address this issue very much from year to year. We can see already there's many declarations, many statements coming out, but also the actual plan of action has also been put out, to address this issue on a short, medium, and long-term basis. Now, of course, after that would be what we call the people. The people agenda is very important because ASEAN is still a region that we have a lot of young people, our youth. So we have to invest in our youth and our, of course, women in the region. What's important is that we need to ensure that they being empowered with better education, better skills, more training, particularly digital skills, because we talk about digital economy. So at the end of the day is that they should be able to take advantage of the current development and by empowering them to ensure that they become the assets of ASEAN rather than liability, for example. So I think investment in the people is a long-term investment.
And of course, all these 6 priorities are all priority, and ASEAN countries members always work towards that 6 priorities to make ASEAN a stronger and better future. Secretary General Kao, thank you so much for your time. And we wish you good luck for the ASEAN Summit in May 2023. Thank you, Dr. Kao.
Thank you.
Pemirsa, tadi kita sudah membahas lebih dalam terkait dengan strategi apa saja yang akan ditempuh oleh Sekretaris Jenderal ASEAN Dr. Kao Kim Horn untuk memastikan bahwa di bawah keketuaan Indonesia, negara-negara anggota ASEAN akan terus memajukan ekonomi di tengah ketidakpastian global, dan juga tentunya isu perdamaian akan selalu menjadi prioritas seperti dengan 5 prioritas lain yang akan dibawa oleh Sekretaris Jenderal Kao Kim Horn. Pemirsa, demikian wawancara kami bersama dengan Sekretaris Jenderal ASEAN Dr. Kao Kim Horn. Terima kasih dan sampai jumpa.